Hello, Wild.
Hello, Karen. So nice to share space with you today.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining me in this new series.
Mm.
I'm excited to get into what's alive to emerge together because there's always juiciness, but also dive into the topic together of both being aligning with the term star seeds to a degree and also raising kids who are star seeds.
Lovely.
Okay, so sometimes these words can get in our way, and whether we identify with them or not, I wanted to clarify what I'm thinking about with these terms to help us not like put us into any boxes, but just to clarify some things that might have been hidden from us earlier in our lives. Right. So star seeds is a term that has emerged in like light worker communities, or those of us who feel like we've shown up in this life to be of a specific, unique purpose to support a collective endeavor. Like oftentimes we feel like we're on a mission. At a certain point in our life, it gets triggered and wakes us up to being like, hey, I think I'm here for a purpose beyond my own soul expression. And the uniqueness about star seeds is that they're souls who have come into human expression, but with an expanded vibrational frequency from other adventures in other star systems beyond planet Earth in other places. So that's the woo-woo on star seeds. What else do I want to say about that? So the idea is there's no judgment of better or lesser when we talk about star seeds or people who don't identify as star seeds, but there is something new coming in with waves of starseed souls who are landed on planet Earth to take us to a new energetic expression, a new grid, different from the old grid, right? And the old grid is kind of based on survival mode, on physical, mental, emotional expression. And the new grid is a more elevated, expanded experience beyond those first three chakras. So then there's also these kids coming in who are star seeds, bringing in additional waves of energy, frequency, higher elevated frequencies, and they've been coming in. So it's like there's almost a progression of higher frequencies landing on the planet. Many star seeds have been coming for generations. We might have had many lifetimes coming to planet Earth, but these kids coming in are in the last 30 years, 40 years, maybe 50 years. Maybe there were some scouts that came before that, but generally since the 70s and beyond, and it's almost snowballing, so that in the last 20 years, so many kids landing on the planet we could call star kids or starseed kids. And because they're bringing in additional energetic resources that haven't been a part of our collective experience before. How does that land?
Yeah, it feels very true in my body. And I definitely have a sensation of knowing that, but it's more than just knowing it in words, just a sensation of, oh, these kids are operating in a different space, in a different energetic space, mental space, emotional space, almost as though they've come in already having firm self-esteem implanted. And it's been very fascinating to watch.
Okay, perfect. Yes, I'm feeling tingles as you expand on that. So I've invited you to connect with me today because you identify with these terms and being a parent of a couple of amazing starseed souls. And so you have experience with your own journey and also your kids and raising your kids. You are also an amazing creator on the planet. So I want to invite you to take a moment just to share your work in the world before we dive into parenting.
Oh, my work in the world. Yes, my name is Wyld Lee, and my business is currently Wyld Lee Tarot. I identify as a seer and offer truth transmissions to those who are looking for support in finding their own resonance with themselves, with their higher source. I like to offer that I simply hold space and open my conduit and allow connection if one is feeling disconnected with themselves and their mission and why they're on the planet. And I am currently expanding my work in particular to support people in female bodies in liberating themselves mentally and emotionally so that they can truly step in to these deeper levels of work, of knowing themselves, of showing up in these critical and fascinating times. So that's me in a nutshell.
Beautiful. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Having sat within your container, just your one-on-one containers, I can verify to the power of your presence and your work and what can emerge sitting with you. So thank you for showing up.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think these times are incredible for not only what's possible and the potentials with all the energies that are landing on the planet, but also the necessary quality of having of being able to step into containers such as the ones you hold, group containers, individual one-on-one containers. It's almost like mandatory in order to weather and navigate these times and hold on to that inner knowing of ourselves, right? And to be able to show up with the capacity that we're here to show up with.
Yeah, that's really what we've been invited into as we're stepping into the Aquarian age. You know, it is coming together into a hive, into oneness. And that brings along the requirement of interdependence, you know, that we do need one another, not to do the healing, but to support as we all do our own healing, if that makes sense.
Yes. So let's think about the kids in our life, your kids. I would love to hear your experience because, you know, our missions are amazing and beautiful, but there's a lot of ways we get in our own way, and there's a lot of conditioning that keeps us back from that. And it's oftentimes our inner circle of people, our own parents, our children, our partners who are here to help us clarify, right? Clarify our field, literally clarify, and identify where that conditioning is in place. So I'd love to hear, just, you know, tell us about your kids with respect for them, right? We won't go too deep into their stories. Your young people are young adults. They're almost like launching from the nest. So just tell us a little bit about your relationships with them and how old they are, and a little bit about the journey of, you know, how they've supported you to become who you are actually showing up today. Any of that?
Yeah, I've not ever thought about these things out loud, so that's really a fun question. So I have the honor of being the mama of two young men, and one 18-year-old and one 17-year-old on Friday. And I know. Yeah, they have been hands down my biggest teachers in this lifetime. I was surprised with both of them. They had not been on my grand master plan for myself as a young woman. And allowing that experience to come into my life and navigating surprise, I think they have supported me so much in learning how to be flexible with life and how to not judge experiences just because they aren't my preference at the moment, you know, learning harvest the gold of any particular situation. And they're both quite different. Their personalities are on opposite ends of the spectrum, even though I've been a single parent and raised them primarily on my own in very equal ways. It's been very, it's been very nourishing to me to recognize that um, one of the belief systems I was carrying was that I was responsible for how my children turn out. And as
Mm.
I've been able to witness their evolution and recognize that's not my responsibility at all because they are so different and I parented the exact same way. So these souls, they come in with this full program, and it's not my job to corral them or force them into a mold. It's my job to keep things safe, make sure food is on the table, make sure there's a roof over their head, and educational opportunities that I can afford, um, and basically doing my work is what I've come to. That my
Mm.
biggest job as a parent was to continue to ferret out the ways in which I was out of alignment based on my own trauma from my family of origin,
Yeah.
etc. So that's been that's been my journey, and I have to just honor and give thanks to my children because I am quite different from them as well, and they love to refer to me as their hippie mama. At this point in their lives, they don't necessarily jive with the things that I full on believe and trust, but they've never shamed me for it. They've never tried to keep me
Mm.
in a box or um, have behaved as though I'm utterly ridiculous. They just allow me my space to have my process. So I really appreciate that about both of them.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, you
Yeah.
said some really powerful things there. I want to unpack a little bit. Because what
Yeah.
I'm seeing is like, as we shift into this new era on the planet, right, where there's this old paradigm that's still in many structures, including the parenting structure. And
Mm.
so we come in, most of us who are parents today have come in having had that structure installed in our system from our own parents and them from their parents and on and on. And a lot of that original structure, old structure, not original, but old structure, is parenting from judgment and fear and control based. And I need to pour in all the goodness so my kids will grow up virtuous and successful. And that's what's shifting right now, right? And these kids are supporting us to recognize, oh man, that doesn't actually work for these kiddos.
Yeah, yeah. Big learning lesson. I wish I had been able to capture it sooner, but it is what it is.
I know. I think we all have that wish of like, man, why didn't I come in with that before I had kids? But I think it speaks to this. That is also a program that I need to have this all figured out before I start into this project called parenting or being a mom or starting a business or whatever, right? I need to have it all figured out. But we were probably at our tip top. I often like to remind us that we are always doing the very best we can with the consciousness, knowledge, and resources we had in that moment.
Absolutely. And I feel called to add in that for myself, it's really important to remember the intersectionality of all of this work that we're doing. When I think back to my younger years as a mom, I did do the best I could. I was researching. I read every book. I looked up experts, but I was operating from this framework of perfectionism, from
Mm.
being in this capitalist patriarchal culture that had implanted this identity of what a woman, and at that point a wife and a mother, is supposed to do, be, and produce, right? And so I hold a lot of compassion for myself, and I hope anyone listening can tap into that compassion
Mm.
as well. It's that we are unraveling and disrupting a lot of unhealthy patterns from the previous paradigm. And parenting happens to be the one that's so easy for us to get hooked into what I call mother guilt. I see this in my clients a
Mm.
lot. It's like they didn't do something perfectly. Now they wake up to it. They recognize that they were doing what their mother did, what their father did. Yeah, okay. It's a family of origin issue. It's an ancestral pattern, but guilting and shaming ourselves for that is never going to fix the problem. Like we can't fix
Yeah.
what we don't prefer by heaping on more dense emotional energy that we don't prefer.
Right. Right. Because that's working with it from the old grid,
Right. Right.
right?
Mhm.
That's part of the conditioning, the guilt and the shame as leverage to get better. That's
Mhm.
never going to shift us into the new grid, into the new paradigm.
Absolutely. And I also love to remind people that in my cosmology, our children chose their parents. Like we all chose our parents before we embodied. And I believe we choose our parents for the things that they would consider mistakes, not for the things that they're great at. That we like to come into these bodies to have these challenging opportunities because we're here to play and test ourselves and grow and try on new things. And if everything's all gravy and golden, then we don't necessarily get to find that edge and push
Mm.
beyond it for
Yeah.
ourselves.
Yes. Yes. And, the idea that we're here to play, I think is really, really helpful when we think about parenting and think about why our kids are here. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of us dropped into families where there was a lot of density. And because we knew we had the capacity to transmute that, to evolve that. And maybe some of us bit off a lot more than we realized we were stepping into, right? We didn't realize it would take us 30, 40, 50 plus years to do the work. But the thing that has shifted with these waves of children is they're not choosing those dysfunctional families. They're not choosing dysfunction to land in. Most of them are choosing starseed parents who have been doing the work for a long time, parents who are seeking to shift that paradigm within themselves and within their nest, within the home. It doesn't mean that they've got it all figured out. And I agree with you that we've come, we have agreements with these amazing souls who come in through our bodies, and to continue that evolution of what we started, and to keep going, to expand it further. And they're gonna they're here to start off running. They're not here to spend half a lifetime in therapy or moving all their past baggage. They're literally. So let's talk about different waves of kids and see if you identify with them related to your two kids. So I also have the experience of raising two young men who are vastly different from each other. And understanding the different waves of star kids really helped me clarify how to show up for both of them. So there's a wave that I call them the spiritual warriors. Another term is like the indigo kids. So they're like the kids who are here to challenge and question and test everything out. And they've kind of got this warrior energy, and they can be really direct and in our faces with things, and just bringing that challenging energy into their dynamics, whether it be in their education, in the home life, out in the world. They're just always going to be looking at the system and critiquing, because they're here to really bust up the status quo. And so they kind of come in with that energy of like, okay, let's get to work. Let's start dissolving the system from the inside out or from the outside looking in. They choose different vantage points to do that. A lot of them are in schools, bringing it to the surface. A lot of them are stepping out of schools, forging new pathways. There's all different ways that all of these star kids are showing up. But this group specifically is bringing sort of this warrior energy into their engagement. And they're very artistic. They're really smart. They're intelligent. They have a lot of like mental intelligence. And they're also, can be very competent, very tech savvy. They've kind of got all the answers. They can come across as abrasive sometimes, but it's because they're like trailblazers, in a sense. So they need that energy to move forward into their purpose. They're not easy to parent. They're really going to mirror to us all the old paradigm that's still within us, from the parenting perspective. But,
Yeah.
So that's that wave. I don't know if you have something to respond to that, or if I should go into talking about the next wave, but.
Well, immediately I was like, oh, both my children fit into all of those descriptives, but I'd like to hear what the other ones are.
Yeah. And I want to say, as a parent, can be like, ooh, let me put my kid into this box, so I can understand them better. And there's service. That's why I use the labels now, because there's service and understanding that. But it's true that, all starseeds are going to have a little bit of all of these energies, because it is an evolution of frequency. We're supposed to move through all of these energies as we evolve and, the ascension, or whatever you want to call it. So the next wave are, I call them the heart masters, also called crystal children. So these are the ones who are just the warm, deeply loving, connected, communicative, relationship-based. They're really engaging from the heart. They've shifted, they're here to shift us back into our heart zone, back into being more self-empowered, heart-centered people. And so they're all about connection and communicating, and they see the world from that more expanded vantage point, that they perceive things more from the bluff, where it's a little rosier there. They're not necessarily quite so ready to engage in battle, although that can come up, because they're gonna be, all of these kids are gonna be, they, like, I think you referenced a little bit, they're coming in with completely new templates. And they're here to be in their truth. That's a big piece of the gift that they're bringing, is to be strong in their truth. So if that's getting challenged, they're going to step in to meet that challenge, right? A lot of times. These kids also, the crystal kiddos, they understand that expanded consciousness of the interconnectedness of all things, of oneness, and whether they're like mentally conscious of it early in life, or maybe that awakens for them later, that is playing in their field and in their engagement with us. And that also means that they can feel the discrepancy of the reality of our current reality that's still caught in so many old systems. And that can be a challenge for these young ones. They can feel that, like, they feel their mission, they feel the truth of things, but they don't yet see it reflected in the larger reality. And so that can stir up dissonance, right? That can stir up depression, or, this is true for all the like indigos as well. They can get really it can be very discouraging to not see pathways that, they're clearing the pathways, but they're often not there yet, and so they can take on these causes of where that compromise is happening, especially the crystal children. They'll feel that compromise of, like, we're not caring for our planet, we're not caring for the earth, and they'll begin to see those more and more, like, as, and sometimes I feel like they almost sense it unconsciously, but it's not really in their conscious expression yet as they grow up, because I know a lot of them are choosing to be born into families where we also hold that consciousness. But it's almost like it needs to rise up within them. They're not going to take it from us. They're not going to let us install anything into them. So it's almost like when we push our agendas, even if we think they're in line with that higher consciousness perception, they're going to resist. I don't know if you run into that. I've definitely run into that in my own.
Oh, yes. Well, after that description, my youngest feels like that's his truth very much from that space.
Mm.
And it's so true with both of them. I I feel like I have to dance very delicately with the information I offer, because if there's any edge of have to or should or this is the way, this is right, this is
Mm.
good, like any of those boxes are not well received in any way. Like they are very much, I want to do my own research. I want to
Yeah.
feel and do whatever this is. And I want to make my own decision and my own choice based on what feels right to me.
Yes. Yes.
Mhm.
100%. Right. It's almost like they're here to clear the deck. And as I'm seeking, as we're talking about this, it almost feels like when we attempt to do that as parents who were born into a different, paradigm, that some of that energetic remnants is still part of our engagement on these topics or things we want to bring forward for them. Like they almost need to nope, I need to clear the deck completely to bring in this new way of thinking, way of being, and obviously that's going to work best if they're born to starseeds like us, who have this we're growing in consciousness of oh, okay, the old ways don't work for these kids, let's bring in some, but we still likely have some remnants of tendrils, right?
Oh,
and
yeah.
and it's almost like we're doing the fine-tuning work of them mirroring any of that back to us.
Oh, yeah. It is so sticky. I have to catch myself on an almost weekly basis where
Oh,
judgment starts to come in, like, oh, they are spending way too much time on their phones. Judgment. Oh, they are, whatever the topic is, we have vastly different opinions about many, many topics, such as food and the amount of water one should drink and the amount of exercise one should get. And at least in my family, I just keep coming back to power with, not power over, power with, not power over. And I want to foster connection with my kids, and judgment ends connection.
mm,
So
mm.
if I start to lean into the vibration of judgment, I just have to remind myself, I don't really know what's best for these kids. Like, how can I possibly know? I'm not in their body. I don't have their frame of reference for the world. I've not taken in the media that they've taken in, or been friends with their friends, or been in their
Mhm.
skin. Like, how could I really know? I have ideas, but those
Yeah.
are preferences.
So
Hmm.
something you just spoke to that seems very powerful for me is the presencing that you're being called to again and again and again. Like
Yeah.
being present in your own experience.
Hmm.
Mhm. And that is so powerful because that is really our biggest place of impact, right? Because these kids are really well parented by our demonstration, especially the older they get, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
and this also recognizes that we are parenting energetically 24/7. Even when they go off to college, like mine did, we're still in shared fields.
Yeah.
And so me taking responsibility for my field, for what's alive in me, whatever judgment is rising up, right, is one of the most impactful things I can do.
Mm. Mm. Mm-hmm.
It's one of the most impactful ways I can parent.
It always comes back to our own
I
selves and our
know.
own inner
I
work.
know. I think we're all going to be called into being intuitarians.
I love that word. Never heard that word
Right. I
before.
might be vegan for a day, but maybe not tomorrow because I'm an intuitarian. So every day I get to tune in and determine, what does this body need today? What does my whole system need to be coherent today? And then how can I bring that into my relationships? How can I support a partner to do the same and my kids to do the same? And
Mm-hmm.
you're right, like everybody's template is a little different because as these frequencies get woven into the collective and we each open to allow that to inform us, not only is our energetic experience and our spiritual experience and emotional intelligence growing, it's like our physical bodies are shifting as well.
Yeah.
Our biology is shifting. And a lot of these recent, like we haven't talked about the rainbow kids, and maybe we'll save that because that's the more recent wave, but their biology is completely different. Like their template is really different. And so you're right, technology is a different experience depending on the person. Food, the intake of food and water, sleep is all different depending on the person, depending on the day. we're in that phase, right? Where it's like every day, okay, what does this system need today?
Yeah. And I also, and maybe this is dense way of thinking, but I keep hearing myself say they're also supposed to make mistakes, that humans learn, at least I have learned best by doing things that were out of alignment so that I could find where my alignment was.
So
And so
yeah, that kind of segues into where I felt us going, which is, so if we think about, our adventure here as humans as this giant infinite game in this playground of creation, it's true that we've been playing in a corner of the playground that has some limitations, right? First of all, the third dimension has a lot of limitations. And that's been a huge challenge for us as humans, as souls in human bodies. And it's a challenge that many of us were eager to take on because of the opportunity to grow and evolve. But we are actually, like, we're literally getting to the edges of that playground and pushing against edges that, like, we're realizing there's a cap to our evolution in the way that it has been. It's some people could say it's been rigged, or we can say we agreed to that rigging because we knew we could evolve beyond that. But we're at that sort of phase where we're reaching those edges and being called to to be present with it there, right? And these kids are assisting us at those spots. And so as parents, it's really tricky because, yes, I think, that those edges, that limitation, whatever force has been present to keep it capped to this smaller experience than what is possible, is also seeking to co-opt our attempts, to grow beyond that. And so it does feel like there's some infiltration happening. The school systems are very limiting on these kids and the ways that they are designed to learn and grow. Yeah. Our food system is full of toxins and all kinds of stuff. Our water systems, every system is infiltrated with some, things that are designed to keep us in these small playground. Did we know that ahead of time? I think so. Does it feel extremely challenging to be in here now? Hell yes, at times, right? And that, that's a part of the game. That's a big part of the game. And so to be a parent and see our kids navigate that part of the game also, knowing the amazingness of who they are and see that co-opting attempt to take root in them, and sometimes even seeing it happen. And also hold that bigger perception of like, wow, they are an amazing advanced soul going through this challenging moment.
Yeah, it's painful. It's definitely full of nuance.
And it has called me to really let go of what I thought I was doing here as a mom. I feel like I've been letting go of that ever since, they came out of my body. But so much more in the past couple of years, like snowballing so much more.
Totally. And you spoke to this earlier, like that I feel in myself this desire to control and like support their experience into evolution, I catch myself wanting to be like, where's your rebellion? Where is your fight? You know, like
Mm,
I I have this preconceived notion that teenagers, you're meant to get out there and change the world. And again, it just comes back to my own inner work. How can I possibly control this gigantic psycho spiritual being and their journey? And who knows what their desire was. Maybe they want to feel expanded and be in density in this lifetime. And you mentioned being like the forerunners, and so what does my little brain even know about what indigo children and forerunning means? Like, maybe it's just actually making it through life. That's what they're meant to do, and just sort of anchor the frequency of possibility,
yeah.
and again, who am I to judge? Who am I to judge?
That's such a good question, always.
Mhm.
Yeah, and you really speak to, again, we come back to this notion that purpose, mission, it's very much an internal energetic expression before it ever shows up in the external.
Mhm.
And who knows, maybe it's like a whole lifetime of holding that expression of your truth, moving through the playground, the matrix, the rabbit holes, whatever we could call it, and holding that expression. We don't, and we're not yet at a time where we can see the energetic tendrils expanding, but it's happening. The ripples are, many of us can feel the ripples happening, right?
Mhm.
Mm, yeah. And it also reminds me of like, that it is part of that old way to create change by getting out there and moving the variables in the external situation around,
Right.
taking out this person, moving in this person, closing down this system, bringing in a new system, like messing with it externally, right? The
Mhm.
physical variables. That's how we create change in the old system.
Right. Right.
The new system is going to be different. It's going to be from the inside out.
Mhm.
Doesn't mean that we're not taking action or making physical choices, creating with physical quality, but it's coming first from that inner power and inner alignment of which you spoke to.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not sure what it will be like for these kids, but for myself and for many of the people that I know who are, self-identify as healers or who are doing this work, we didn't get to that place until we had the on the knees moment, where the dark night of the soul, going through something so painful and so shattering that it really cleared away the veils and brought the preciousness of this moment into focus. And so I'm curious how you feel that experience might um, affect and apply to these new waves of kids coming through. Do you think they're going to need to move through similar experiences,
Mm-hmm.
or is global warming and the state of the world enough?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's something we're deciding every day.
Hmm.
Like if we're creating change from our inner alignment or misalignment, um, then we're going to be seeing the results of that.
Hmm.
And we're doing this collectively, right? So it's not just me. This is like the old paradigm. I create change in my own life. I'm an individual. I'm separate from you. But the crystal children, the rainbow children, they're bringing in the awareness that, what one of us and act, whatever one of us acts, that's affecting all of us.
Hmm.
And the energy that one of us is imbuing into the field is impacting all of us potentially, right? So that question of like, do we need to go rock bottom? Do we need chaos to create change? We've certainly needed that in past times. It's been
Yeah.
the precedent for chaos to create change, and it's created change, but it hasn't always created transformation, right?
Hmm.
So I
Mm-hmm.
think we're being invited to consider internally, do I need chaos in my life right now to actually design heaven on earth in my reality, in my experience, and the experience for, do I need that? Maybe we do need it still. I think this is something we're all playing with, but I don't think it's going to be the way we're going to need it in the future. And I think, our rainbow children are here to demonstrate that to us. And they're young right now. The oldest ones are just in their teen years, but the youngest ones are just being born and toddlers and really fairly young. So that's yet to come. And that, it's an infinite game.
Yeah, would you like
Right?
to describe the rainbow children a little bit? I
Oh,
don't.
sure. So, you know, the rainbow children are really, they're here with that brand new template. So these are kids who haven't had lifetimes on earth. They don't have karma. They don't have any baggage. And so they're just living in they're here to be in their truth. They have a lot of energy because they don't have it, they're constricted with baggage. That really constricts our vital force energy when we're lugging around all that ancestral karma and trauma. These kids don't have that. So they have lots of energy. They lots of enthusiasm. They're very much in their truth, which can be just triggering in and of itself to the adults around them. They're not here to pretend. They're not here to fit in. They're not here to conform or accommodate. They're just here to be themselves and demonstrate what that looks like. So I almost don't want to define them any more than that, because I feel like it's like in evolution big time right now. Who, all these kids are going to be bringing forward their own unique frequencies with that wave, but they're also the ones who are like, indigo kids, crystal kids. They can they're dipping in and out of systems, and sometimes they're really in the systems, like to kind of crunch it up, right? With like education systems, the economic system. These kids are not really going to be a good match. The rainbow kids are not really going to be comfortable in any of those systems. They're going to be, we're going to have to create, they're going to really need to be encouraging the creation and creating themselves, forging the new paths of like what they need as far as supporting them, guiding them. As parents, I think a lot of times we can feel like, well, I just need to back off then. If my conditioning is getting in the way of their mission, well, then what is my role? But of course, these children do need us. All of these, they recognize that they need us. Those agreements that were made ahead of time. And so to my mind, they really need us to be guides for them. Especially the rainbow children, they're not used to these physical bodies, they're not used to density. And so the physical body can be quite a challenge to fit their expansiveness into. So they need us to guide them. They need us to, navigate this playground, help them orient into the playground. They need us to listen to them, right? And to respect them. And this is for all the kids, like to listen, ask powerful questions, like guide them into knowing themselves. And, help them find the spaciousness, the spacious places where they can be in their truth. Help them to create those, spacious environments, those circles of friends, those wherever they're going to go next, identify, is this going to be a good match for when I'm here to be? Help them identify, when it's not a good match so they can step out. And you're right, there's a lot of mistakes that are going to be mistakes, right? There's a lot of trial and error. These kids actually are pretty, especially those first couple waves, they're here to fail fast to learn fast. So we're going to be they're not going to take our word for anything, right? They're going to figure it out themselves. Yeah, so if it's an infinite game and there's going to be waves upon waves of potential evolution, I think that's going to be a question for us and then future generations. How do we want to continue the evolution? Do we want to continue to have patterns of chaos? Or do we want it to be, I mean, the crystal children, the rainbow children, they're really here to bring in a new potential in that area.
I love that. And it really braids well with what I'm working on in my own personal life. I'm really doing a lot of somatic work and trying to operate in this life from the lens of pleasure and sensation instead of from that lens of chaos, where the mantra is it's all fine and it's all working, instead of there's problems that need to be solved. Instead, there's simply experiences that need to be experienced,
Yeah.
and I get to choose what place on that spectrum from joy all the way to grief. Where do I want to experience
Mm,
this particular moment in my life?
yes.
Hmm.
Mm,
Wouldn't that be great if all of our children could just come in enjoying the fact that they are huge energy beings in an animal body that gets to use all five senses and feel and emote and just like experience sensation?
yeah. Yeah, I think that was a big draw for all of us with this playground, right? Because that's the
Mhm.
potential here. The potential to create is amazing. What but most of us been creating at in that small corner, and these kids are here like, did you know that there's 9 levels of consciousness available to experience as humans on planet Earth? 9-dimensional layers that is possible here. And here we are at the third, the fourth. Maybe a few of us are starting to explore the fifth sometimes. There's
Mhm.
just so much more potential. There's so much more than meets the eye. But you're right, like these are just the we haven't even gone all the way to experience the full pleasure of what's here right now with these 5 senses, right? The
Mhm.
sixth one is on board, and then it's like, okay, let's go all in with all of them. And I
Yeah.
love the calling in of joy and pleasure as motivators, as change making experiences, because
Mhm.
I feel that too. Like whenever, I mean, we can just ask ourselves, what happens when we get to an edge? An edge, we know we're in an edge because we're feeling something uncomfortable in our body, right?
Mhm.
Maybe we call that fear, maybe we call it excitement, but there's something stirred up, right? I mean, maybe it's not uncomfortable. Maybe we're getting more and more comfortable with just feeling the stirring up of that
Mhm.
power.
Yeah. Well, and I think for me, pleasure is the antidote to that chaos, right? Like chaos is the
Mm,
hook that happens through the mind space when we step into an unknown territory, when we step into great mystery. The brain says unsafe. I don't have a box I can place this in. Then contraction happens, then protection happens, then we begin to spin out the rabbit hole story of why the new thing is unsafe, right? But if we can simply flip the switch in the mind space from danger to simply unfamiliar territory, it's simply something that we have yet to experience. Can I find the pleasure in the exploration? Can I tap into the
mm,
curiosity that might be available around this unknown? It really is that next conscious up leveling of stepping out of survival and fight, flight, freeze into conscious awareness of using all the data that is present.
yeah.
Mm,
Yeah. So from, taking off on that, like if it's just stepping over an edge, which leads me to another area of the playground. It's just
mhm,
that unknown area. And in this playground where we've been playing, oh man, we know what's happening here. We've mapped it out. We have all the rules and the guidelines mapped out to help us, orient us, keep us safe, right?
Yeah.
Over there, none of that. Like, we don't know.
Yep.
But if it's just a playground.
The monkey bars. I've never been on the monkey bars.
Yeah. What does that feel like?
They look a little weird. I have to orient my body differently. I have to get momentum moving in a different way. But can it be a fun experience?
Yeah. The analogy of the playground is so helpful to me, and it's been we're getting to the end, but I just want to I think I want to close on this. But my very first memory as a child, I was probably 2 or 3 years old, or one of my very first memories was sitting on a swing and being swung by one of my parents, probably, and just that sensation of swinging and yelling to go higher and higher and higher. Like, I wanted more. Like, I can feel that elation in my body when I think about that memory. And I feel like that's all, we're all being reminded to come back to that. Because that's what we probably all felt. It's definitely what our children felt, choosing to come into this adventure, this playground, this crazy planet Earth. Let's go higher.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that's alive for you to wrap up with? Before, I also want to give you a moment to invite people to lean in to know more about you and your work in the world too.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. No, I'm just sitting here with that image of the playground. I'll definitely take that with me. That really helps soften the mind even more. I love that idea. And then as far as getting to know me more, you can check out my website, wyldleetarot.com. And I'm on all the social media spaces, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. I also have a podcast, Wyld Lee Tarot Podcast. And I would be so delighted to connect and get to know more about your people and continue elevating all of us as we're learning this new playground together.
Thank you, Wyld.
Thank you, Karen. I appreciate you.
Yeah, me too. Me too. It's so good to be alongside you. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording.